Hey, welcome back to Mobility Project. Two special stars today, Georgia and her twin sister, Eva. I want to talk today about kind of taking on some of the childhood problems that we see in our young athletes. Now, one of the problems that we see all the time in young athletes is that they grow like weeds. It's really weird. We feed you guys, you grow like weeds. Now, the issue is, one of the things that we see is that bones grow a lot faster than muscles. And if anyone's ever tried to lengthen their hamstrings or lengthen some of those tissues, you understand how long that takes. We regularly see kids grow 2 or 3 inches in a year, even 6 inches in a year, without some kind of commensurate program to encourage that movement and lengthening of those tissues. Now, the number one thing that you can do with your kids is to encourage good movement patterning, straight up. So the best thing we can do to kind of reinforce the growing tissues and changing tissue mechanics is to reinforce good kind of, squat mechanics, good jumping mechanics, good landing mechanics. This is why your kids have to be in some kind of organized training program, either CrossFit Kids or some gymnastics or something where someone's teaching them to move a little bit. Now, one of the big problems, we'll take one of these off at a time, that we see a lot of, and we get a lot of requests about, is to talk about a phenomenon called Osgood slaughters. And Osgood slaughters, do you guys feel this bump right here, you guys? This is the bump where your muscles in the front of your leg comes down and inserts right in here onto, this is called a tuberosity. And it's on the tibia, the tuberosity of the tibia, so this tibial tuberosity. Now, if you at home, go ahead and feel your own bumps on your knees, you'll find that they're probably large. And I actually have a little larger one on my right side than I do on my left side. And when we see that these become abnormally large in young people, or we get a very painful spot here, and this is called Osgood slaughters. And essentially, it's not a tendinitis. This is where your quadricep ligament comes from your patella and inserts into the leg. But what ends up happening is that if we have an irritation of the insertion of that ligament or tendon onto the bone, then that interface starts to become irritated. And what ends up happening is the body responds in kind for these young people by actually growing large bone here. And so because the bony tissue is so soft and so full of cartilage, that we end up growing a big bone here. Now, one of the things we want to do then is say, hey, this is a real problem. This Osgood slaughters problem is significant for our young athletes, because it becomes very painful. They get a big bump here, and it really changes the leverage mechanics of their knees. And kneeling is painful, jumping and landing becomes painful, and this is a problem for growing young people. So this is a two-part process. One of the things that if you talk with any young athlete or coach who works with young athletes, you say, hey, prioritize the problems you see for me. And they'll say the first thing is, all of my young athletes sit in a chair for 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 hours a day, plus they eat at home and they go back and forth, and so they're sitting almost the waking third of their life when they're not at school. And this is a problem. So the very first thing that happens is that we're starting to get short hips early, and we're practicing having kind of short anterior hip, short anterior quads. So let me show you what a quick test is for kids. And then this is a normal range of motion for those of you out there who are young adult leopards. This is a young supple leopard. On your stomach, you guys. And we should easily be able to flex heel to butt, no problem, without any ranges. And you'll find that this is no problem for both of these guys. Heel to butt, no problem, without lots of overextension in the back. I know they're not in true hip extension, but this is a quick test. And what we shouldn't see is that the legs shouldn't flop out. In fact, we shouldn't even see a lot of resistance in the leg as we go heel to butt. And you can start to see that Georgia actually has a little resistance. She's been running around. No resistance here, very nice. And that's easy, it shouldn't provoke pain. Obviously, if you think something is above your pay grade, go get help from a physio, go talk to your doctor, go talk to your pediatrician. But remember, they don't teach your kids how to squat. So usually when we see this problem here in the knees, will you pop up for me, you guys? What we see is that this is an over-tension problem. Kids grow, they're very tight, their hips are short, and then we end up having an over-tension-itis kind of thing, the phenomenon. The second piece that we always have to resolve, and not just be so naive to say, hey, it's no problem, it must just be tight anterior structures, is how we move. And can you guys both squat for me again? Now, there you go. You saw Georgia correct her feet. We should see feet should be straight. And one of the reasons we want to see feet straight, can you pick your knees up or your hands up, Emma? In this position, is that her knee isn't really over her foot. And in this problem, in this position where the knee comes in, this pull is off axis, which means that it opens up this little apophysitis prone area to off axial tendon loading. So you get your feet straight, get your feet straightish, and then shove your knees out. Boom. Now she's in a rock solid position where that tendon is loading actually correctly. Feel a little bit straighter, perfect, knees out, and that's our strong bottom position. So keep your feet straight, knees out. Come stand up for us. Good. And this time I want you guys just to drop into that position. Drop. Boom. And you'll see that we should, again, be reinforcing good mechanics. Oh, she makes the correction already. Knee, feet straight, go straightish, knees go out. Now we have correct tendon axial loading, and at the same time, we end up with reinforcing and unloading those tissues, especially if I have kids who are tight to begin with. Stand back up. Beautiful squat, you guys. Now, when we teach jumping and landing, I want you guys just to do a little jump and land in 1 inch. So just slight bend. So this like a slight bend in your knees. Right, now, you'll see that Georgia landed knee forward, and it's this jumping mechanic where we teach our kids to jump and land without stability. Remember how Tanya teaches you to jump? Doesn't she teach you to jump and land with your feet together? So let's do that. Ready? And land. Good. And now, with feet straight forward, we minimize some of this loading and we minimize some of this forward position. Ultimately, we want to get our kids transitioning the same mechanics that we have when we jump and land. Because what we see is that kids who are doing a lot of sports who aren't strong enough to change these positions, we see this translational loading. So we see an over-tensioned quad, knee translates forward, and we explode this tissue here. This is not a place to talk about this other than to say, hey, we've covered how to deal with this. Rest, ice, compression, elevation. Go get some help. You're going to have to put the flames out. But the first thing we need to do is make sure that we understand what the problem is. So this is not osteochondritis. This is, remember, it's called Osgood Slaughters. And thank you guys very much for being models. And do you think that it's okay to stretch your kids? Heck yeah. PNF, I had a great pediatric instructor who said muscles and tissues are like obedient dogs or obedient supple leopards. And don't ever be afraid to start a mobilization program for your young athletes. MobilityWOD out. Thanks, guys.